Hello, sweet friends. We are back in the Homestead kitchen this week, cooking up some good food for my family and for some friends who just had a baby 2 weeks ago. I wanted to prepare some things fresh for them, but also stock their freezer a bit. So all of the meals in this video are freezer friendly. To start off the week, I'm going to make some bagels. It's been a little while since I've made some. My kids have been asking for them, and I thought it'd be a good freezer meal for our friends to have some breakfast sandwiches that they can just pull out and warm up whenever they need them. I'm mixing together some warm water, yeast, and sugar, allowing that to sit for a few minutes until it gets nice and bubbly. You know it's activated and ready to go. We'll add some olive oil, some brown sugar, and get it combined with our dry ingredients. Now you can probably hear the remnants of sickness in my voice. I feel fine. It was just a cold this time, praise Jesus. Nothing really serious or prolonged, but I still sound kind of sick, although I wouldn't consider myself sick. This week, I just didn't have the energy back yet after getting over the sickness to just do one big freezer meal prep day. So I decided to break it up throughout the week, and then as I made breakfast or dinner for my own family, I would just double up the recipes for our friends. It doesn't really add on much extra time at all, and it really spreads out the workload. For these bagels, I combined some salt and some flour and then mixed in the yeast mixture and combined it well. We're going to knead it for a good long while. Usually I would start this out in my mixer, but I'm doubling it since I'm making it for two families, so hands it is. Now I'll have this recipe down in the description, but I know some of you like to just hear it in the video. So exact ingredients here. It's 2 cups of warm water, 5 teaspoons of active dry yeast, and a teaspoon of granulated sugar. You allow that to sit and activate for about 5 minutes. Come back and add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 tablespoons of light brown sugar. Mix that up, and you're going to add that to 6 cups of flour and 1 tablespoon salt. We're kneading this really well by hand for about 6 to 8 minutes. This dough is not quite as elastic and doesn't get as smooth as some of my other bread doughs. That's just the way it is, totally fine. Work it until you can get it somewhat smooth, and then we put it into a grease bowl, allow it to rise for about an hour or until doubled in size. Since I doubled the dough, I am dividing this into 24 about equal pieces. You can be super precise and weigh it if you like. I just choose to eyeball it, and it's all good. So I am kind of pinching the dough together on one side, trying to make a nice uniform ball, making sure that bottom section really does come together and stick really well. Otherwise, your bagel will just kind of come apart and look a little funky. And then I'm just going to poke my finger through where I made that seam, and then take my hands and gently pull it apart. You want to make sure to cover your bagels as you make them. And in the meantime, I have some water boiling on the stove top. It's about 2 quarts, and I added a 1/4 cup of honey. This step here is going to give your bagel that like really nice, thin, leathery skin. So we allow them to boil on each side for about 45 seconds, removing them and putting them back on to a parchment-lined cookie sheet. I have that sprinkled with cornmeal, and we'll just continue that process until they're all done. I'm going to take the boiled bagels, I'm going to give them a nice little egg wash. I just took one egg and I mixed it with a little bit of water, maybe a teaspoon or two. I'm going to brush that on, and then we want to add our toppings. Today I chose some cheese. I'm going to do some everything seasoning, and then I also kept some plain. These go into a 425 degree oven for about 20 to 22 minutes. Bagels, besides being a little bit time consuming, are honestly so easy. It might seem a little intimidating at first, but once you just decide and go for it, you won't regret it. They're so good. There's nothing like a homemade bagel, and it's so hard to go back to store-bought after you have made your own, and it's a fun little project to get the kids involved with too. My kids think it's really funny to poke their fingers through the dough, so it's a nice little afternoon activity if they're going stir crazy like mine have been with this heat we're having. So we're making some bagel breakfast sandwiches. Obviously, that's some eggs. One of my favorite ways to make eggs for breakfast sandwiches is to scramble them up, add a splash of milk or heavy cream, some salt and pepper, some onion powder, and then pour them onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet. They cook super quick in the oven, nice even layer, and then you can just cut them into whatever shape you want. It only took about 10 minutes at 350 degrees. One less thing I had to stand over the stove for. And then for our meat of choice, I'm just gonna pop in some bacon along with that. Now, if I was preparing these to eat fresh right away, I would have toasted the bagels, but I'm just taking an untoasted bagel right now because I'm gonna put these into the freezer for our friends. I had some shredded cheese in the freezer that I buy in bulk. So I'm going to lay that on there first. And like I said, I just cut these eggs when they're done. I cut them into squares. I don't know if that's off-putting. Sometimes, like, my kids will be funny about that. Like, Mom, why are the eggs square? But you can cut them into whatever shape you want. Lay a slice of that on there, top it with some bacon, and then I ran to the pantry. I like to put some sort of sauce on these. One of my favorites is my peach ale mustard. I'm gonna make some more of that this year. We love it. It's so good on everything. And then I just place it on some saran wrap, wrap it up nice and tight. I usually put a whole bunch of them then into like a bigger bag all together, and then you can just pull them out at night, pop them in the fridge so they can thaw, and then you can put them in a toaster oven or into the oven for a few minutes just until they are heated through and you've got breakfast ready to go. On to our second breakfast this week. I'm just including all the breakfast together, and we'll do dinner later in the video. So I'm going to make some special baked oatmeal. I love these oats that I get from Costco, the sprouted oats that are glyphosate free. However, the texture of them, honestly, even when baked, is just a little bit chewy. They're a little bit hard. There's some crunch left to them as well. So I like to run them through my food processor. I just started doing this, and we like them so much more, enjoy them so much more. So we're going to make some strawberry cheesecake oatmeal. Well, actually, it's going to be raspberry cheesecake oatmeal because I only had a couple strawberries from the garden, so there's a little bit of a mixture in there, but mostly raspberries because they're coming in hot. So for this oat mixture, I have 3 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats, and then I added to that some sugar. I did 1 cup I used coconut sugar. You can use your sugar of choice. We're going to add 2 eggs, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 cup of milk. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce, teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Now for the cheesecake part, the really good stuff, we're using some cream cheese, 4 ounces, 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar. You could just use some maple syrup if you want to take it easy on the sugar, and 1 tablespoon of milk and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And you're just going to stir that up. You do want to heat it up a little bit so it kind of drizzles over the top. I added 3 cups of a combination of raspberries and strawberries here, and I'm just going to fold that into the oatmeal mixture before I pour that into my prepared baking dishes. No, I am doubling this, but I used 2 9x9s, have them greased, and I'm going to drizzle that cheesecake mixture over the top the best that I can. It didn't drizzle very well, and then I just took the back of my spoon here and I kind of tried to make a nice design in it. Again, it was a little bit on the thick side, so it is what it is. So these bake at 350 degrees for around 40 minutes, and you do want to allow them to cool down after they've baked for at least 10 minutes before slicing into, so they can kind of set up. Here it is all done. Let me tell you, this one is a keeper. We've made this a few times, and it's one of our favorite ways to have baked oatmeal. It freezes beautifully, so it's a really nice, quick freezer meal to put together and stock in your freezer. So that one there is for us, but if I was going to put it into the freezer, I would do a layer of aluminum foil and then saran wrap right on it, what it is, and to warm it up in the oven at 350 degrees from thawed for about 15 to 20 minutes. On to our third breakfast recipe. Now, I have mentioned before, I'll mention it again, I cook 3 days out of the week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I always prepare enough so that we have leftovers for the rest of the week. Works out great for us. We're not afraid of leftovers, and it just saves me more time in the kitchen later on in the week, so that way I can tend to other chores around the house or things that need done outside without having to be in and out of the kitchen throughout the day. So this is the third and final breakfast recipe. This week we're going to make a big batch of banana pancakes. I forever have some brown bananas on my kitchen counter. It's just the way it is around here. If I didn't buy them, my kids would want them. So I just buy them, and I use them in other ways if they go brown. One of our favorite ways is this pancake recipe. So for a single batch, it is 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I mashed up 4 bananas. I'm making a double batch, so I would say 2 bananas per batch would be perfect. I did 2 tablespoons of melted butter, 1 egg, 3/4 cup of buttermilk, although you could just use milk if that's all you have, 1/4 cup of brown sugar. I like the brown sugar in this recipe. It really makes it, but you could totally use coconut sugar. You could try maple syrup as well. And we did 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I was going to make some sheet pan pancakes, again, just to save myself some time. Pour all of the batter onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet and bake it 350 degrees for about 8 or so minutes. You just have to keep an eye on it. I didn't because I love how these get kind of caramelized in a cast iron skillet with that brown sugar in it, and the banana, like these are really brown bananas. There's a lot of sugar content in them. They're just so good when cooked in a cast iron skillet in some butter. So yummy and caramelized. Mention it now. Anything that I prepare for the freezer, I try to use within 3 months. It'll probably be fine after that, but sometimes it can start to take on flavors around it, and it's just the quality starts to degrade then after 3 months. For the pancakes, I like to make sure it's cooled down. Everything that you are freezing should be completely cool. You don't want any sort of like condensation happening that's going to destroy the end product. They just go into a gallon freezer bag, and then I just pull them out as I need them. On to some dinners for the week. We are going to make a fun variation of lasagna. This one is not, like the sauce isn't as liquidy, and I'm gonna use these no-bake lasagna noodles. So I want to soak them just a little bit, ensuring that they're not like hard and inedible when they're all finished. So just in some warm water for like 5 minutes or so does the trick. So the first part of this recipe we're going to make is a sauce. The ingredients for that are 12 ounces of cream cheese. Now, again, don't look at what I'm doing because I've doubled everything for every recipe. We're going to do a cup of half and half, a teaspoon of minced garlic, and then we're going to do some salt and pepper. Now, you will see here, I made a grave error. I did not mix the cream cheese first before adding in the liquid, and let me tell you, chaos ensued. I was like, I'm just gonna gun it, and I don't know what I was thinking. I turned it up way too high, and it just splashed all over the place, and I had a royal mess. So don't do as I do. Mix the cream cheese first till it's nice and creamy, and then add in your liquid ingredients, and all will be fine. So after I recovered from that, we're gonna make the other part of our recipe, the other filling. So you need 3 cups of cooked and shredded chicken. You could use a rotisserie chicken. I boiled an entire chicken since I'm doubling. I used all of that meat, and then I also had some broth to give my friend for her to sip on. It's great postpartum. I did 14 ounces, a 14-ounce can of artichoke hearts, a half cup of Parmesan cheese here that I freshly grated, and then, let's be real, I decided I'm going to finish it up on the counter because my arms started getting tired. I did 8 ounces of shredded mozzarella and a half cup of sun-dried tomatoes, and I also chopped up some basil fresh from the garden. We're going to get that mixed up. I don't think I've actually said yet exactly what we're making, but it is a white chicken caprese lasagna. It's very good. It's a fun variation on typical lasagna. I love anything layered with pasta and cheese and a good sauce. Come on. I've had quite a few people in my last few videos where I've been making meals if my kids will eat what I'm making, or if I am making them something separate in addition. I am not making a second meal for them. It is always a requirement that they try whatever it is mom makes. They don't always love it. Sometimes they need encouragement to finish it, but they always do finish it. And honestly, if it's something new, usually it's just a little bit of encouragement, getting them to take that first bite, and then they realize they like it and they continue eating it happily. We don't struggle with them too much anymore at dinner time. I mean, there's still things that they are very picky with, and I try to be sensitive to that. There are certain things I know that they just won't eat, so I don't ever force those things on them. And then in those cases, I do always keep some convenience meal things on hand, like chicken nuggets and smiley fries, and that's totally fine with me. So as you can see, we are layering a little bit of that cream cheese sauce on the bottom, layer of noodles, layer of the chicken mixture, layer of noodles, layer of chicken mixture, top it off with noodles, and then more of the cream cheese sauce. So half of the sauce goes on the bottom of the pan, the other half of the sauce goes on the top. Nothing goes in between the layers there with that sauce. Saved some of my fresh Parmesan for on top, and then the really yummy part, we're going to put some slices of mozzarella on there. That's going to get nice and golden brown and bubbly in the oven. Topped it off with a little bit of some basil as well. So 350 degrees for about 25 minutes. If it's not getting golden brown and bubbly for you, you can put it underneath the broiler for a minute or two to achieve that yumminess. So for the one I am giving to my friends, I am not baking it. Lasagna is not something that freezes well after it has been baked. It just kind of turns to mush. So I am putting it into the freezer uncooked. I am just going to place some aluminum foil, saran wrap. Again, I'm going to label it. Again, I usually pull out my freezer meals the night before, allow them to thaw in the fridge, and then it'll bake normally at 350 for about 25 minutes. Now, you can bake all these things from frozen. You're just gonna have to double, if not triple, your baking time. For the next dinner recipe, we are making a braised beef pie with a biscuit topping. So I have 2.5 to 3 pound pot roast here. I used a chuck roast, and I just trimmed off any excess fat, cubed it up, seasoned with some salt and pepper, and then we are gonna just toss it in some all-purpose flour. Just so all the sides are nice and coated, and we're gonna fry this up, browning each side. That's just gonna lock in the moisture and the juices. Searing it is just gonna provide some more flavor, give you a better end result. I have a thin layer of olive oil in my Dutch oven here, nice and piping hot. We're gonna do a single layer of these beef cubes, and we're gonna brown every side. It only takes a couple of seconds, like 20 to 30 seconds per side if it's nice and hot. And honestly, sometimes I just get kind of impatient and I just start pushing it around. It all ends up perfectly fine. Just keep repeating that process until all of the beef is seared. I'm going to remove that from my Dutch oven because we're going to saute some onions and some garlic. So I never cook with a whole lot of onions. I'm actually using shallots here. I usually like half what the recipe actually would call for. You can use as much as you want, but I just used 2 medium shallots here, and I did about 4 cloves of minced garlic. So I sauteed the onions until they were nice and caramelized and softened, and then I added in the minced garlic, just before I'm going to add in everything else, just to get it nice and fragrant. We're going to top that off with some beef broth here. We're going to scrape up everything there on the bottom, all those golden bits that contain all of that flavor. I added some red wine, and I'm sorry, I forgot to say how much beef stock. I did 4 cups, and then I did 2 cups red wine. I did 1 cup of orange juice, and then we're going to add in some seasoning. I did some bay leaves, some fresh rosemary from the garden, and I did a little bit of nutmeg and some salt and pepper. This is going to get covered, and we are going to slow roast this for about 3 hours at 300 degrees in the oven. About 30 minutes or so before our beef is ready in the oven, we're going to get to work on some biscuits we're going to top it off with. So we get 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and then I cut up some cold salted butter, about 1/4 cup, and we're going to blend that in. We want to make sure still leave some nice little bits in there so that we get a really flaky biscuit. Make a well in our flour mixture. We're going to add some buttermilk, 1 cup. So I apologize for how irritated I look. I promise I wasn't irritated. Apparently when I'm not talking to you on the camera, I look this way. I don't normally film this way. But since I had just gotten over a cold, my voice was still really struggling, so I just decided to do a voiceover this week. But I promise I was happy. So we mixed up our dough. Don't over mix it. You want it to be nice and flaky. So we're gonna flatten it out, and we're gonna cut some biscuits with whatever cutting device you have. Sometimes I will just use like the ring of a mason jar or the rim of a glass cup. Once the beef was ready, you'll know when you can take a piece of it and it just completely falls apart. It is totally fork tender, melts in your mouth, amazing. So I removed the bay leaves and like the sprigs of rosemary, and I'm just splitting it between 2 dishes here because, like I said, I'm making some for our friends as well. So we're going to take those biscuits and we're just going to set them right on top of the beef. These will bake at 375 degrees for about 12 to 15 minutes. Just keep an eye on the biscuits. As soon as they get golden brown, they're ready. Now, to go with this meal, we're going to try some of the honey ginger carrots that we pressure canned a few videos back. You can totally put carrots or peas or potatoes or something in with that pot roast. I would just throw them in probably like the last half hour or so of cooking in the oven. I just decided to leave it as is, and then we're doing a canned side. So I mixed in a little bit of brown sugar in those honey ginger carrots. They weren't just quite sweet enough to me. Honestly, all I really tasted was just a whole lot of ginger, which wasn't necessarily bad, but it needed something else to balance it out. And honestly, we were pretty pleasantly surprised at how yummy those were. My husband even liked them, and he's not really a fan of cooked carrots in general, so that's pretty impressive if Matt likes some canned carrots. So I think it's pretty safe to say that I might be canning those again. So this is the last dinner recipe I have for you. I'm sorry, I wanted to do a third, but earlier on in the week, I just wasn't feeling up to cooking. So I'm actually going to be sending along another meal for our friends. However, this one is just entirely canned. Our friends are actually just getting into homesteading themselves, and my friend, she really wants to start learning how to can. So I thought they'd actually appreciate that. I'm just going to send along some things that they can quickly throw together for a nice meal. So I don't have a third recipe to share with you. Sorry about that. Hopefully you understand, but I just was not feeling up to another dinner recipe this week. Thank you for hanging out with me in my kitchen. I hope you enjoyed today's video and all the recipes shared. Maybe it gave you a little bit of inspiration for the coming week. I'm going to leave you with some footage of the garden I took this week right around golden hour. Things were just beautiful and glowing. The crickets were out chirping, and it was just a beautiful evening. Thank you for taking some of your time out of your day to spend with me. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me out. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. You have a blessed week, friend, and I will see you next time. Take care.